What is your best guess as to why Game Boost is falling short so significantly of the proclaimed 45% boost to raster performance in the PlayStation 5 Pro? Do you think Sony is limiting raster power for non-professional titles, or was the 45% figure just a best case scenario that will only apply to a select few titles? So that was an interesting thing that came back from the testing we did for the professional, right? Because as soon as the spec reveal happened and Mark Cerny revealed that they're expecting to see 45% extra performance from the GPU, there seemed to be this deluge of PC equivalent specs that appeared that actually presented very good value and made you wonder whether you should buy a Pro at all. We test Game Boost, and most of the time you're getting 30 to 35% of extra performance when you're not hitting a frame rate limit like FreeSync, for example. But it does seem to be the case, but we've only looked at this at one game, that the result does sort of shift upwards at 120 hertz. We've got to look at more games there. The question is, why aren't we seeing 45%? And there's a few reasons for that. Potentially moving into boost mode is essentially a compatibility mode that may not offer all of the features or all of the performance of the hardware. Truth is, we don't know. Alex, you might be right in something you brought up earlier, which is that there's a lot of scenarios where the Pro is going to be bandwidth limited, because you've got this whopping great GPU upgrade, but only like 28% extra memory bandwidth, which again has to be shared with the CPU. So yeah, I mean, I'm open to theories here. I mean, we do need to do some more Game Boost testing to see, whether we can actually get more than 30 to 35%, and also whether 120 hertz, that extra performance, notional extra performance, actually may apply to more titles. But what do you think about this, Alex?
I do think, well, beyond Game Boost testing, one great thing we could try and hope that we get more examples of this is avoiding Game Boost and looking at it in a patched situation where we have like for like settings between the two versions of PlayStation 5, PS5 Pro and PS5, and then we just look at the performance differentials there. That would avoid the whole situation of, is the entire system unlocked for game boosting? I mean, I would hope that actually the entire system is, from a design perspective, because the future of PlayStation is going to be more fluid than like it was back in the day, and having the system accommodate faster hardware and taking advantage of it, as in like from the API design perspective, is just good design instead of having it be artificially limited. So I would hope it is actually fully unlocked and operational for the future. So I think that's a great way around it for our future testing, and we may have some candidate examples of that. God of War Ragnarok, which we talked about earlier. We have to do some more about that. But I think the bandwidth thing is actually a real thing that is probably taking its toll, because if we look at the PlayStation 4 Pro, maybe that was more dire, I would say, in terms of...
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was like the amount of increased compute was not at all in good relation to the increase in bandwidth. And we saw that particularly intensely in games where they just couldn't even target 4K, even though there could have maybe been the shading power there. They would go to like 1440p or something like that. And here, less of the case in terms of raw percentage, but I would still say it's going to definitely take its toll. And as I hinted at earlier, on the PC side of things, when AMD increases the CU count of a GPU to make it more powerful, they also increase things like memory bandwidth, the memory interface, or it's always the same. The amount of cache is increased on each GPU going upward. And that does have an effect if you look at the 1080p to 4K benches and how they scale. The larger cache GPUs are failing way better for their shading power at higher resolutions like 4K. So targeting 4K also may be a thing here. We may also see titles that target 1080p, for example, in like 120 hertz mode, and we may see larger differentials there.
Yeah.
than we may see at 4K potentially, because it is less bandwidth hit. It all depends on what the game's doing, I think, but I think the 30% figure does point at maybe some bandwidth issue.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I mean, Microsoft did deploy full GPU power. I mean, they literally told us that they deployed full GPU power from Series X onto Xbox One X titles. And I don't see any reason why Sony wouldn't be doing the same with boost mode. I mean, it's AMD. John, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I mean, you guys covered it pretty well, but by and large, I mean, I've been mostly happy with the results. I would say it basically did fix most of the problems I had and bumped up titles to where I kind of hoped they would be. Elden Ring is the one that is a little disappointing. I mean, it definitely does, I would say, largely fix it. It is perfectly fine now to play and sticks within its VRR window, but the jump is perhaps not as great as I expected. But that could be a case where it's more CPU limited or some other weirdness going on with From's engine, that creaky old engine. So, yeah, I'm actually surprised that they haven't. I mean, I guess what would they do? I was going to say there could be like a pro update for it because the game's popular enough to, I feel like, warrant that. But again, it feels like From Software is typically not in the business of doing that sort of thing. They did, I guess Dark Souls 3 got a pro patch, but that was only because it came out around that time for PS4 Pro. So, that's a bit of a shame, I would say. But, you know, again, most games that I've tested, they definitely run better, especially those titles that are 120 frames per second. Or like Resident Evil 2, I tested out last night, the remake, and now you get 60 FPS locked with ray tracing, or you get 120 FPS locked without it. Either way, it's completely smooth and it's great now on the PS5 Pro.